Okay, now we are ready to take our LT16 HD into the shop. And as you notice, this is shipped vertically.
Okay, Juan, I noticed that this one has some damage here. Did we note that on the shipping slip?
Yes, we have.
Fantastic. Make sure you note that on the shipping slip here. Now you can see we have gloves and glasses on. We're going to take these bands off, and you can do it with a traditional wire cutters or some tin snips. I'll show you a really quick way though. Just take your hammer and be careful. This is spring steel. It may spring back on you, so use gloves and give this a quick twist. Pop the bands off. And again, watch out. These bands will spring all over. All the metal banding out of the way. Cut yourself with it. Be careful, the ends are extremely sharp. Okay, now we're going to take the box off the top. One, you want to grab this side and simply slide it straight up and off the top of the saw. Now we're going to want to examine the saw here. We had a hole up in front here. I'm going to make a quick check. I don't see any damage to the front of the saw. If you were to notice any damage in the front here, again, give us a call within 24 hours. You can see the bandsaw is all wrapped up. The motor will be here, the fins and accessories here. This will be your blades and your owner's manual. You want to take these off, remove them, set them to the side, keep the owner's manual handy. You'll find that there's some Allen wrenches here and some additional bolts inside here. We're going to start unwrapping the bandsaw. The table is mounted down here in the bottom. When we get to this point, we'll take caution to lift that out of the way as well. And we'll begin just taking the plastic off. Just like Christmas. Boy, that was easy. Let's go ahead and remove the box here. The motor is banded into place. We're going to set the table to the side as well. These are the items that come in the box with your bandsaw. You'll notice that you have your foot pedal, your blade guard, your rip fins, your throat plate, the table pivot handle, long Allen wrench, standard Allen wrenches, open-end wrenches. You will also have 4 leveling bolts for your bandsaw. You'll use these if you do not have a mobility kit on your bandsaw. The black stud will be used up in the right front corner of the bandsaw near the door, so the door does not hit a bolt head. Now's a good time to take the bandsaw off of the pallet. And if you don't have the use of a pallet jack, you may want to do this in the driveway. Install the mobility kit on outside of the shop and then roll it into your garage or shop when it's on the mobility kit. There'll be 4 bolts, 1 at each corner. Now this is one step where you again want to have a friend handy. We're going to walk this gently off the pallet here to get it off the wood and onto the ground. And you want to have a friend help you out. And basically you just take the saw and tip it and walk it back to the back. Okay, go ahead and move the pallet. The saw tip back, it's on its own weight here. I'm just keeping the balance. Slide the pallet out and set the saw down. And we're going to pop the band here that secures the motor. One, grab the motor so it doesn't move anywhere. Watch out for the cable. Okay, I'm going to gently rock it back while you pull the cable out. Okay, then let's set the motor on the floor right behind the saw. Now that we've got the saw opened up, you can see the saw is fairly completely assembled. We'll have to do a few steps. We'll install the table, we'll install the motor. You notice also that the saw has a hook on the top or an eye bolt. That eye bolt is to secure your saw during shipping. Do not try to lift the saw by this bolt though. You want to notice a few things about the 16 heavy duty. First off, instead of having two separate doors, they're actually connected. So you need to release the bottom door and then release the top door, and you'll open those together. The reason behind that is if you're putting a blade on your saw and you're down at the bottom, you cannot stand up underneath the top door when the doors are open. It saves you from getting a headache. At this point here, we'll go through and just kind of check a few things. We'll cut off the rest of the packing. And I'll shut the doors right now. At this point, before installing the motor and the table, I like to put the mobility kit on where the saw is light. Okay, to install the mobility kit, a lot of times it's easiest to put it under a 2x4. We'll rock the saw back, position the 2x4. You're going to have it far back enough to clear the foot of the bandsaw. And we'll get the foot hitch and the bolts. This is pretty straightforward. That's all there is to that. Okay, we're going to rock it forward. Remove the 2x4. And we're going to repeat this process on the back side. I'll rock it forward. Your washer, your wheel, your washer, and then a lock pin. The mobility kit's on there, it's ready to go. Let's get it off the block. Now you can move it around the shop quite easily by rocking it back in the bar and pulling it around the shop. Well, the next step that we're going to do is to install the motor, and you'll actually look inside the owner's manual package and you'll find the bolts for the motor. If your saw has the ball door motor, you'll actually use these bolts. These are an American thread. If your saw has a European motor, you'll use the bolts that are supplied during shipping. Those will fit the European threads. Juan, would you like to give me a hand with the motor? We'll open the front doors. And as you saw on the other saws, the belt is already installed on the pulley. We're going to put the motor through the back. We're going to line the pulley up here. First thing that we do is remove these bolts. And again, if your saw has the European motor, you'll actually use these bolts. Now this bolt actually goes through a collar, and this is part of the belt tensioning mechanism. We'll go through that in just a moment. I'll slide these off and out of the way. This is the 90-degree stop for the table. I like to put it up here so it's out of the way when we're putting the motor in the backside. It's on a chain so that you can't lose it. Okay, Juan, we ready for the motor?
Yes.
We're going to put the motor in the backside, and I'll put the bolts in the front. There's a short and a long one. The long one is preloaded in the collar here. This will be the pivot bolt. You'll definitely want to have a friend around to help you with this. As he fits the motor up there, I'm going to go ahead and line the belt up. One, can you drop it down just a little bit? There we go. And then we're going to rotate it and put this in the pivot. Rotate it this way. Thread this one in by hand, but don't tighten it. Now we'll bring the other one over. And sometimes you want to rotate the brush out of the way to give yourself some clearance. Get this bolt started. Alright, now that you have the motor installed, you want to make sure that the belt is lined up on the top pulley and on the bottom pulley, and then we're going to set the tension on the belt. This is a good place to use a deep socket. Take your deep socket, put it on your belt tension bolt up here, and begin by raising the motor by tightening this bolt. It's going to raise the motor up. Make sure that these two bolts are just finger tight right now. And you'll see this raises the motor up in this slot. Starts to put tension on the belt. And you'll check it as you get tighten the belt here. You'll start to feel it, get a little bit of tension on it. Again, turn it. You're going to want to have about a 1/4 inch deflection on the belt. After the few hours of running the saw, that belt will probably stretch and you'll need to adjust it. If you're ever cutting during the bandsaw and it feels like it's slowing down or losing power, many times it's just the belt, and you simply get underneath it, give it a few turns right here, and then tighten the bolts back down. Now that we have the belt adjusted, we'll lock the motor in place. Snug these down. And there you have it. Now that your motor is installed, you take the 90-degree stop, put it back in place, rotate the brush in place. If you need to tighten it down, use an Allen wrench and tighten the little set screw. Make sure that the wheel spins freely. Now we're going to go through and put the foot brake pedal on, and we'll also put the front blade guard on as well. Juan, you want to give me a hand? This is the accessory box that came with the saw. Here's the front guard. This is the fence. We're going to take the fence, set it to the side. The foot brake is placed on with these two set screws right here. It's an Allen headed set screw. This goes through the outside, and the screw goes right back in place. Okay, these tighten down with an Allen wrench. And there's our foot brake. The bolt for the blade guard is on the back of the door, and we'll bring the blade guard up, run the bolt through it, and install it on the front of the door. I'm going to leave this in the down position right now. Later on we'll raise it after we've put the table on and adjusted the guides. As you can see, this bandsaw is shipped with a lot of grease and cosmoline on the table. We'll go through and clean it. A liberal dose of mineral spirits or WD-40 or some other cleaning fluid on it. Some disposable rags. To install the table, we're going to remove this bolt right here. If we need to loosen it, use the Allen key supplied with the saw. Remove this, and then remove the lock handle. And the washer. We'll set these to the side. These will be installed in just a few moments when the table goes on. As you can see, half of the trunnions are on the saw already. The other half are up on the bottom of the table. Let's go ahead and meet the two halves together, and we'll put the bolts through. This table is heavy. You definitely want to have an extra pair of hands around for this. Stay there. Now's a good time to test the geared trunnion. Make sure that the table pivots smoothly and locked in place. Before we go to wire the motor up, it's important to push in your off switch. This is your bump switch or your dead man switch. Make sure this is pushed all the way in, and make sure it's off during the entire installation of the motor wiring. Now we're ready to get the bandsaw wired up with power. The first thing we'll have to do is to remove the rear cover. There's two small 10mm nuts that hold the rear cover on. We'll remove those, pull that off, and we'll take out the insert on the bottom here to see how much cord we'll need to feed through. You'll use a number 10-3 power cord for this saw, along with an appropriate plug for your installation. This bandsaw is shipped with no cord on it. The reason that we do that, we want to make sure that you use an appropriate length cord for your installation. And this part is used for installation with smaller gauge wire. You'll set this to the side and not use this for a 10-3 power cord. As you can see, it installs the cord through the pressure fitting and into the box, allowing enough cable on the inside to make the connection, and secures the nut. Pull the cable all the way through the box. Install a cable tie so that the wire cannot be pulled away from your bandsaw. Strip the wires back about 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch. Give them a quick twist so that all the strands are compact.
Make sure that you understand that the yellow and green wire is your ground wire, and you correlate with your green ground wire on your cord.
The first wire that you'll install is the ground wire. It's the green wire on your 10-3 power cord, and it'll actually correlate with the yellow and green wire on your bandsaw. You notice that this wire on the bandsaw junction block goes to 2 different connectors. You can use either one. The next legs are line 1 and line 2. These are the power lines, and they're interchangeable. You can install either one in either fitting. This will be on the left-hand side of the junction box on the back of the bandsaw. Now tighten down the compression fitting, tighten down the 2 mounting bolts, and you're all set. Now that our motor is installed, we're going to want to go through and do a few tests to make sure that it's wired properly and everything is working okay. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to pull out the red knob, and we'll pull it out until it clicks, and we're going to turn the bandsaw on to make sure that it starts okay. Working perfect. Hit the switch again to make sure that it shuts off. Now that we know that that works okay, we're going to do a few other tests to make sure that some of the other systems on the bandsaw are working properly. We know that the motor works okay. We'll pull the switch out. We're going to open the doors. And as you'll notice at the top of the doors here, there's a micro switch. This prevents the saw from starting up when the doors are open. I'm going to try to start the saw now. It won't start right now. We know that that switch is working. There's another micro switch down here at the foot brake, and you can kind of see it behind the wheel here. We're going to check and make sure that this switch also works at this time. We'll latch the bottom. We'll start the saw. Absolutely perfect. It shuts the motor off, and we didn't have to touch the switches. We're now ready to install the throat plate. This is in the accessory box. It simply drops through the hole on top of the table. Press down firmly. You want to check it with a straight edge. If it's not level, there are 4 bolts in the corner here. You can simply reach under the table, adjust those up and down to perfectly level the throat plate. If you haven't done so yet, take the little steel pin and install it between the 2 table halves. You'll see that it's attached to a little aircraft cable right here. This locks the 2 table halves together. We're now ready to install our fence. We've already put the handle on. We'll slide right on. And again, this can pivot to go out of the way to allow you adjustment to the bottom bolts. And now you can see it slides back and forth with 1 finger. Now is a good time to adjust the fence. You can check it for square. This one happens to be right on. If this is out of square at all to the table, you'll simply loosen the mounting bolts and adjust it up and down. That also will raise and lower the elevation of the fence to make sure it's not dragging on the table. Again, it should slide back and forth. About that easy. Before we install the blade, we're going to take the guides and back them all the way off so that they're clear of the blade. You'll use the Allen wrench supplied in your toolkit and loosen these 2 set screws. guides all the way back. Move the thrust bearing all the way back. The lower guide is adjustable, so it'll go up underneath the table. Sometimes you may have to raise the guide in order to get to the bolt behind it. We're going to loosen these two here. We'll raise the guide up, and we're going to loosen this fastener, this set screw in the back here. We'll loosen that, we'll push the guides all the way back, and that way they'll be clear of the blade when we install the blade. We'll bring these up and adjust them completely later. For the meantime, we'll loosen and back off the side guides. And we'll just leave this finger tight for now. You may have chosen many different blades to go on your saw. In this case here we have a 1/4, a 1/2, and a 1-inch blade. We also purchased a restocking blade. Let's go ahead and install the restocking blade. When uncoiling your bandsaw blades, you want to make sure that you have some gloves on. I like to make sure that I have the saw shut off with the bump switch. Alright, let's uncoil the blade. Let's make sure that the teeth are pointing down on this side. And I'm going to go ahead and open the cabinet. I'll pull the pin. And I'll open up the blade guard on the saw. And I'm ready to put the blade on. We'll thread the blade through the outside here, through the slot in the frame of the saw, over the top wheel, over the bottom wheel, and we'll begin to thread it through the throat plate, into the upper guides, and the lower guides. Now that the blade is generally positioned, I'm going to go ahead and bring up some tension on this. We'll begin by cranking the wheel, and you'll start to see the tension come up in the tension window. Now that we're done uncoiling the blades, I'm going to remove my gloves. And I'm going to center the blade on the top wheel. I'll center the blade on the top wheel. I'll position it on the bottom wheel and bring the tension up. Okay, now that the blade is on, we're going to go through and adjust the tension and track it of the saw. We're going to bring just a little bit of tension up on it and begin spinning the wheels. Again, use caution that you don't stick your fingers too far through the wheel and catch them on anything on the back side. And as we turn it, we're going to see where the blade wants to go. This one is okay right now. We're going to put a little more tension on it and check it again. As you bring your tension up, you'll see the tension numbers come up in the window. These will correlate with your blade size. This is a 1-inch blade. We're going to read 25 in the window. Now that we're up to the proper tension, we're going to go through and check the tracking once again. And this is perfect. If you need to walk the blade forward or back, you do so with the tracking knob on the back. On the restocking blade, I like to run the teeth just over the edge slightly. Now that the blade is on, it's tensioned and it's tracked, let's go ahead and adjust the guides. We're going to slide the rear guide forward to where the ceramic is about 1/8 of an inch or so behind the gullet or the cutout of the tooth. Once that's in place, we'll lock it down with the Allen wrench. Once that's secure, we're going to bring the thrust bearing forward to where it just touches the blade and lock it down with the set screw. We'll repeat these steps with the bottom guides. Now we're ready to adjust the side guides. At this point I can shut the top door and secure it with the thumb screw. That's good to go. Now to set the side guides, you'll push the first set in to where they just touch the blade, but don't deflect or move the blade like this. Just touch the blade and secure it with the thumb screw. For the second one, you slide your dollar bill right in like this. Bring the guide just to the dollar bill and tighten the thumb screw. Remove your dollar bill and you're ready to go. For most applications, I like to raise the lower guides up right underneath the table. The only exception to this would be if I was going to tilt the table for a miter cut or a bevel cut. I'll bring them right up underneath the table. Secure the set screws there. And I'm going to bring the guide forward, and again, just about 1/8 of an inch or so behind the gullet of the tooth. And I'll lock the set screw in the bottom. Great, now that that's secure, we'll set the side guides. We'll bring the first guide right up to the edge of the blade and just touch it. Don't deflect the blade. And then the second one, you'll space off with a piece of paper or a dollar bill. Snug it down, pull it out, and you're ready to fire up the saw and begin your first cut. At this point, I like to spin the wheel and just listen. Make sure you don't have a weld that is hitting the ceramic at all. Okay, this is a good time to check the blade and the table to make sure that they're 90 degrees. You'll put a square pair. This one happens to be good. But if you need to go through and make any adjustments, you'll do so right here. Loosen the jam nut and set your positive stop to where this will read 90 degrees. Make sure that before you set this adjustment here that you've loosened the lock knob here for the table so that it can move freely.